Unreal has always had a bit of a strange origin in terms of its identity, popularity shifting in its prevalence between the three main entries. At its core, Unreal has always been in reference to the engine that it is built on, confusingly of the same name. It was common back in the 90s for companies to name their games after the engine it was built on, or vice versa, Quake being the first franchise that comes to mind, or Scum being another. Script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, in case you've always wondered. At present, Unreal is back in the realms of showcasing its new and shiny Unreal 4 engine to the world, but prior to this its most adored claim to fame would be the Unreal Tournament series, and rightfully so. A revolutionary mix of fast-paced action, brilliant level design, awesome music and excellent multiplayer execution, Unreal Tournament hit the ground running in 1999 and will more than likely always crop up in any top 10 list of games I contemplate in my head. But a year before this, we had the third and probably less known of the Unreal children, the aforementioned Unreal. I remember not being amazingly impressed when I first played Unreal. It looked good for the time, but it lacked the excitement of something like Doom or Duke Nukem 3D. I've been trying to remember how we actually came about owning it in the first place. I believe it came bundled with a graphics card along with Carmageddon 2, which is a fantastic game, but realising that just rattled my brain for half an hour trying to remember whether we had a Voodoo 2 or an Nvidia River TNT 2. I believe it was the latter. Anyway, Unreal fell off everyone's to-do list as soon as Unreal Tournament came about, and that held the limelight all the way up to 2002 when Unreal Tournament 2003 confusingly came out, followed 2 years later by Unreal Tournament 2004. But in between those two later releases, snuck out a game in the franchise which, unlike its predecessors, wasn't developed by Epic Games or designed by the excruciatingly nicknamed Cliffy B. No, Unreal 2 was developed by a small company called Legend Entertainment, whose previous releases include The Wheel of Time, a game I had never heard of based on a novel I had never read, but now really want to obtain a copy of, as looking at the screenshots portrayed it to be a cross between Hexen, Clive Barker's Undying, and Requiem Avenging Angel. Or at least that's what I hope it to be. Dropping the tournament suffix from its title, Unreal 2 The Awakening returns to its former single-player focused roots, while still adhering to its FPS genre and universe of different races and cultures. This instalment has you take on the role of John Dalton, a former Marine who at the beginning of our story is once again being denied his reinstatement by Commander Hawkins, who sends him back to his role in the Colonial Authority along with a new alien pilot and set of objectives. With a brief introduction and plot backstory over, you are free to either partake in a weapons tutorial or head straight back to your ship. Either choice will result in you taking a brief stroll around to take in what were at the time some pretty spectacular graphics. It is worth pointing out that Unreal 2 has far more plot exposition than is really necessary, and this isn't a bad thing by any means. This was the early 2000s when games were really starting to evolve more rapidly to cover over a broader range of content, and for a game that comes from a series most commonly known for its combat and multiplayer, it was a brave move to take this step. When you return to your mothership, you are met by Ida, who along with having an enormous pair of eyes, acts as your source of mission briefing throughout the rest of the game. Before long, she will have given you the rundown of your first mission, to investigate a distress signal sent by the mining planet of Sanctuary, which is said to have been overrun by hostile aliens.
Mayday, mayday! This is the Leandri Station Lima 6 on Sanctuary. We're in trouble down here.
The game then quickly throws you into the action, introducing you to your starting weapons loadout and a few basic enemies. For anyone who has played a previous or prior Unreal game, it is hard to try and not make comparison, and the first thing you will notice is that the combat and player movement has been slowed down significantly. This is much more of a paced shooter. Your character has an appropriate weight to him, stopping him from zipping around the map, and all the weapons have their own fitting amount of impact and timing. Speaking of the weapons, it will come as no surprise to tell you that you'll be using these for 99% of your gaming time. The distress signal you received did indeed turn out to be genuine, and your presence on Sanctuary is fittingly met with hostility from the invading aliens. Your default reliability cannon to take care of the situation takes form of your assault rifle, which I always thought had a very pleasing design to it, somewhat spaceship-like, similar to the Sulaco from Aliens. This, along with most all of the weapons throughout the game, has two firing modes. The first being a fast automatic spray of bullets for mowing down multiple targets, and the alt fire being a concentrated cluster resemblant of a flat cannon. You also have a hand blaster should you run out of ammo, which recharges and can fire a super shot consuming a full power cell, and a grenade launcher which can explode upon impact or be held down for a delayed attack. The first mission, as with most games, acts as your combat tutorial and introduction to level design. First impressions will leave you pleased with a fitting blend of interior and exterior environments, both of which can be something that is hard to achieve in unison. There is a standard level of expected interactivity around the game world, usually taking form of the odd plot convenient button, door or elevator, and these are all serviceable to their progressional intention. Making your way through the first mission, it won't take long to become accustomed to how the game plays and how the plot is forming up. It turns out the mining colony has unearthed an ancient relic that holds an unknown bestowed power, and the aliens want it for themselves. It's not an original premise by any means, but as I have said in the past with FPS games, neither plot nor graphics matter as long as the gameplay is fun and the design is intuitive. After navigating your way down what I can only think is the most counter-intuitively put together reactor ever made, you fight a rudimentary first boss who leaves behind your first relic. Of course, moments later, the military turn up to take this away from you, but due to a poor choice of hiring Ernest P. Worrell for a pilot, they immediately crash land, forcing you to be called back down to the planet to assist them as they wait for an evac. From here onwards, the game takes you to new interesting environments, complete with their own enemies and themes in search of the lost relics. This is a welcome structure, as it helps to alleviate any sense of deja vu that you would get had the environments taken place in one setting. Between missions, you will return to your ship, which acts as somewhat of a one-directional hub. This allows you some downtime from the combat and a chance to liaise with your crew. Alongside Ida, you have Naban, a strange fluid-looking alien situated within a huge suit, acting as the ship's pilot. All I could think of was Dr. Kraus from Hellboy whenever this guy popped up. He will regale you with tales from his homeworld and give you information on the different species of aliens you may have encountered, along with their backstory. I quite like this addition. It gives you the option to find out more about the game's world without shoving it down your throat. Lastly, you have Isaac, who for some reason has a picture of Trinity from the Matrix on his desk, but most importantly fulfills my adolescent gaming need to know everything about a game's arsenal. Every time a new weapon is acquired, you can approach Isaac for a rundown of its features and functionality, presented alongside a nice holographic image. As you progress through the game's levels, Isaac will also add new features to previously acquired weapons, often adding a new alt-fire, new grenade types for the launcher, or just completely upgrading a firing mode for the better.
You can use to hose down a room full of bad guys. Anything else?
The weapons in the game are of course the driving force behind any FPS, and without a good execution the game would fall completely flat. Luckily, Unreal 2 delivers on the gameplay front despite its many shortcomings. For the most part, weapons are fun to shoot, and you are presented with new and varied ones at such a pace that you will never feel bogged down with the ones that you have on offer. The sound design goes a long way to helping the action remain interesting, whether it be the sound of the shotgun dealing its appropriate blast up close in the face of an enemy, the Magnum's clunky mechanical shots that sound like the gun's being held together by bullets alone, or the pleasing way everything just reloads in an overly engineered way. Not all the weapons in the game are on par with each other, however. I never found pleasure in firing the shock lance, it just always seemed a little bit out of place to me, and the assault rifle has almost a non-existent firing sound effect, but strangely does have a present impact sound, which changes depending on what surface you are firing at. For the first half of the game, you'll be fighting your way through primarily linear environments, which range in tone from outdoor forests filled with alien creatures, to indoor structures that have been overrun by arachnids, to more Unreal Tournament inspired complexes with marines to fight. Then unexpectedly, the game plays a new hand, introducing a strategic element complete with base fortification and squad members. These sections are intermittent set pieces, but are a welcome break to the normal A to B progression. From time to time, you will be called upon to defend a point from either invading marines or aliens, and to facilitate your retaliation, you will be equipped with a number of laser fences, sentry guns and squad members. Fences can be placed anywhere, and when in range of an adjacent post, will link up to create the impassable laser stream. Rockets and miniguns can also be placed at will, preferably at points of entry to push back invaders. And finally, you have your squad members, who you can give orders to in which areas to patrol. Each member has different weapons and strengths, so it pays to put them in places where they would do the most damage. These sections can be quite challenging if you have not prepared properly, and are a welcome addition to a game that was doing well enough on its own merits to have omitted them. So the combat is good, the levels are varied enough that they don't get boring, and there is a wide and pleasing arsenal to play with. It's conflicting then that after finishing Unreal 2 for the first time since release, that I was left feeling rather underwhelmed. It's been quite difficult to put my finger on exactly what is wrong with the game, considering all the things I like about it, but what I think it boils down to is that there really isn't enough gameplay to sink your teeth into. Quite often, you will traverse an area for maybe a minute or two before you even see an enemy, and the likelihood of them having an accomplice is very low. With the exception of the base protection segments, most combat is done to a one-to-one basis, and for an FPS with over 10 weapons, that's an odd choice. It wasn't until I was scrolling back through my captured footage that I realised quite how much of the game is just me walking to the next conflict. This wouldn't be so bad if the game had use of a sprint button. However, the main offender of the game's slow pace is the loading times. That's enough of that. I always remembered this taking a while to load, but I thought it was just due to the hardware limitations of the time, but this is presumably the most up-to-date GOG version running off of an SSD, and they are just as bad as I remember. Also, as varied as the levels are, the game never manages to get a foothold in ever feeling truly like it's in a consistent universe. Everything seems a little bit placed without any true direction. Having said that, I do love this Giga-inspired level towards the end. I easily could have done with more of this, and less of that Arachnid level that just reminded me of that Armorines game that's terrible. But is it worth your time is the main question, and despite my gripes with it, I'd say yes it is. The parts of the game where you are shooting things and running around always remains fun, and perhaps because the game is so slow paced, it actually helps engross you more when you do come to conflict. Also, the weapons in the game can be massively enjoyable to play with. The rocket launcher, once it gains its 4-way lock-on mode, never fails to entertain as you watch it split away into multiple objects of destruction. The flamethrower still looks good today, and even though he's massively overpowered, is still satisfying to hose someone down with, especially those spider bastards. Then there are the 6 different types of grenades you will acquire, all of them with different strengths, incendiary and EMP being the most helpful. And it never gets boring, setting people on fire with the shotgun. There are some inconsistencies with the weapons, but these don't prove too much of a problem. You can hold every weapon at once, which is something I sorely miss from modern gaming, but more often than not, at the start of a mission you will have a few weapons missing, the sniper rifle being the main offender here with its inconsistent appearance. Also, you will pretty much never find any ammo for the Magnum, which renders it a little bit useless. And I had no idea I had these orb things until I selected them by accident. They're actually enormously useful as they shoot down incoming enemy fire, but they do make the end of a game a bit of a walk in the park. For a game that's nearly 12 years old, it holds up really well, graphically and gameplay wise, and you could do a lot worse if you were looking for an old school FPS to play. There is also, of course, multiplayer, but I couldn't find anyone playing, so unless you have a group of friends all ready to go, you might spend a lot of time hitting that refresh button. Unreal 2 is available on Steam and GOG. I believe it's a little bit cheaper on GOG and will often turn up in their sale offers, so it's definitely one to keep an eye out for if you haven't played it already, or even if you have and just fancy revisiting it. One final hint before I go, make sure in the options you turn on the side jump. Some people see this as cheating, I see it as getting the fuck out the way. As always, thank you very much for watching. I know it's been a while since I've done a proper review, but I've been very busy with starting a new job and going on holiday and all those good things, but I'm going to make more of a concerted effort now to put one out as often as I can. P.S. Watch how the rocket launcher is reloaded. He pushes forward, the pin comes back. Then he pulls back, the pin shoots forward. Isn't that the most infuriating thing? It's a great game though.